Okay, so we'll get started. So we'll stay in this room, I think, for the rest of term. Again, I think it's the biggest one. Just so you know, I am, if you're new today, if you weren't here yesterday, I am live streaming this class on YouTube because, again, there's a few students who are overseas. A few of us may have to stay home because we get a cold or something during the term, and so there'll be kind of an online version of this class, and there'll be, you know, the real live one as well. Again, it'll just be me on camera, and I'm not sure if the microphone really picks up, like if you answered something or if you said something in class. I don't know that it would make it into the live stream, so don't panic about being, you know, being broadcast to the universe. It's okay. Nobody's watching my channel anyway. Like it's my channel. I'm not the Kardashians. Nobody cares, right? So it'll be fine. Okay, so. All right. So here we go. Official good morning to everyone, and good morning to people on YouTube. We'll just see who's out there. I think Haneen is out there, but I'm not sure who else might be. So today will be kind of the first real. Oh, good morning, Vicky. Morning. Today will be the first kind of real class for social justice. Today we'll talk a little bit about what social justice is, what does it mean, why do we care, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of the perspective from which we want to approach this class, because social justice issues can be a little difficult to talk about. Some of the concepts are a little bit complicated, and a lot of the things that we talk about in here people can have pretty strong emotional reactions to them, and you only have to go so far as Twitter or Instagram to see people having very emotional reactions to anything to do with racism or sexism or anything like that. So it's important that we kind of know how to enter into this subject matter so that we can have a conversation about it. Because I think if you look at what's happening in media and in social media, conversations around social justice issues are often people really aren't prepared to have the conversation, and so instead of a conversation, it winds up being a flaming battle where people are, you know, just saying horrible things to each other. So we don't want to do that. It's never happened in my class. This class has always been very cool and very chilled out. It won't happen this time. Everything will be fine. But it's a good idea for us to talk about how to talk about these kinds of things, okay? So that's what we'll do. Okay, so Vicky's here and Haneen is here. So good morning to both of you. I am going to switch this thing and then switch this thing. Oh, good. Okay. And the other thing, I'm just going to stay up here. If you've been in my class before, normally you know that I kind of roam around everywhere and I'm on my feet, but I'm going to try and just stick to my little bubble here because I don't have my mask on. Again, if you want to wear your mask in class, it's fine. If you don't want to, I think that's okay too. It's up to you. We're all in a bubble now, but I'm going to try to keep as much distance as I can because I can do that. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to try and have this adjusted tomorrow so that it's a little bigger on the screen. It's kind of small. Maybe the other thing I'll mention too before we go any further is I will post things on Student Portal for you. So all of this stuff will be posted on Student Portal. Anything I want you to look at, I'll put in Student Portal and in Microsoft Teams, so you'll have it there. And then YouTube is recording all of this as well, so every class will be recorded as well. So there will be a complete record of this class all the way up to the current date. Okay, so a couple of questions that we'll talk about. What social justice is, why do we care, and how can we start to understand it? Because again, it's a complicated, it's a kind of a complicated topic, and hopefully we can clarify it rather than make it more complicated, but we'll see how we do. So maybe you can tell me just off the top, what do you think about when you think of social justice? What do you think it is? Okay.
Just
Justice in society, okay, good. What else? Equal rights, George says. Anna?
Understanding the rights of people.
Understanding the rights of people, good. I heard another voice. Right, so the right thing to do for society as a whole? Yeah? Okay. What else?
Inequality.
It has to do, yeah, it has to do with inequality and maybe, yeah, okay. What else, what else, what else? That's good for now? Okay, let's see what the survey says here. So this is what we'll say that social justice is, okay? We'll say that one of the things that we will believe if we believe in social justice is that we'll believe that everyone in society deserves and has the right to access the same resources and the same kind of opportunities. And so we shouldn't be denying resources, so jobs or money or social supports or any of that to any particular group of people. Everyone should have equal opportunity and equal access to things, okay? We will also, if we believe in social justice, we will embrace values such as human rights, which I think came up already. The fact that people in our society have equal worth, so no people are worth more than other people, right? All people are equal, although different, but equal. And everyone has the right to be able to meet their basic needs and to pursue the opportunities that they want to pursue. Hey, come on in. And pursue the rights or pursue the opportunities that they want to pursue, right? It doesn't mean that necessarily everyone will achieve everything that they want to achieve, but everyone has equal access to the things that they might want to try to pursue, okay? And if we believe in social justice, we believe in the idea that we want to reduce unjustified inequalities wherever we can, okay? We will probably always exist in a society where there is some degree of inequality because we're all different, right? We're all unique human individuals. We all have different strengths. We all have different talents. Some of us will be doctors, and then many of us will not, right? And so there will always be a little bit of inequality in society, probably. But again, we want to reduce or eliminate the inequalities that are unjustified, right? The ones that have no place or have no basis, right? Why should we care about it? Maybe I'll ask you this as well. Why should we care about it? Why should we care about inequality in society and fixing it? I know we're supposed to care about it. I know we're supposed to want to fix it, but why should we?
Because we're a part of it, and we don't want to face inequality or like bad behavior towards us. So we should not want it towards other people too.
Right. So we ourselves may be sort of the victims of this inequality from time to time, or maybe systematically, right? So we don't want that to happen to ourselves, of course, and we probably don't want that for other people as well, right? So we should try to minimize inequality, even for our own maybe selfish reasons, right? That we don't want to be the victim of it, but also we don't want other people to be the victim of that as well, right? Why else? Why else should we try to fix any unjustified inequalities that we have in society?
It can lead to bigger problems in a country, maybe.
Okay.
For example.
Okay. I feel like you're thinking of something in particular. What are you thinking of?
Maybe like in a country where there is no hijab, maybe but some people want to wear it.
Right.
So there can be inequality, and people may gather and they make a bigger
I think so. In a country where some people wear hijab and some people don't, some women wear hijab and some women don't, you're concerned that
They may get against each other, and yeah, they will, like someone wants to wear it and someone doesn't. So there is no point in arguing over it and just blaming someone for their religion.
right,
But,
right. So inequalities within society can be, to some degree they can be helpful, right? Because if you want more, then you can work harder for more in theory, right? But societies have to cooperate with each other, right? And I think this is a big question for Canada because we have, hey, come on in.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. This is a big question for Canada because Canada is very diverse, right? We have people from all around the world living here, different religions, ethnicities, cultures, genders, sexualities, and somehow we all have to find a way to work together because Canada's only a good place, it's only a good country if everyone is cooperating and kind of working together. If we're just fighting amongst each other, then it's not productive and it's bad for society, right? And so the large country that's about an hour drive that way is an excellent example of that, where you can see that it's really unproductive, right? The country is very strongly divided in a number of different ways, and it's not productive for them, right? They're having trouble fighting coronavirus because of it. They're having trouble taking care of their people's basic medical and social well-being because of it. And so, yeah, you need a country where people can cooperate effectively, right? And when people don't cooperate effectively, you have stuff like that, and then you have civil war and so on and so forth, right? Yeah, but if you think about it, this is a complicated question, and Anna, your responses will be connected to this as well. So one of the reasons why we might want to reduce social inequality, one of the reasons why we might want to pursue social justice, has to do with our perception of how the world works. Okay, and we'll try to pull that apart a little bit later. But how the world works, the culture that we belong to and that we were raised in, the society that we live in, our ideologies, the big ideas that we believe to be true about the way that the world works, or the way that human beings are, or the way that things should be, this still works, good. Those ideologies will have a big impact on how we see the world and how we think things should be, or how things should go. Our sort of personal values or morals, right? The things that we think are right and wrong. Those are going to influence whether we should pursue social equality or not, right? And lastly, and this is probably your first point, Anna, was who we are as social people. And so kind of depending on who we are, we might be more invested in social equality, particularly if things are very unequal for us, for us individually. We might want more equality if we're not getting it, right? So all of these things will kind of influence whether we should care about social justice. And I wanted to introduce a few of these ideas because they will come up again and again. So the idea of perceptions, this sort of concept of ideology, and we'll talk about that more. And then who we are as social people, we'll talk about that very shortly. So all of these have something to do with how we see social justice, but also how social justice works. Yeah. Okay. So to understand social justice, we will need to embrace a few broad ideas. And I'm just going to check on our online people here just to make sure. Cannon's here too. Good. Gabrielle's here. Good morning to you. How to know the rights for each person who lives in society. That was from before. Okay. That was good, Haneen. Thank you very much. I should have grabbed that. I should have grabbed that earlier, but I didn't. But that's okay. Good work so far. Okay, so a few things that we need to do to understand social justice? First of all, we're going to take a critical approach to this idea. There's a little bit of criticism about critical approaches to things, but that's okay. We don't need to dig that deep into it. But here's the tricky part. We're going to try and look at this from the perspective that A, society is stratified, okay? So strata, I think, is a Latin word. It means layer. And so things that have layers to them are stratified, right? They have strata, they have layers. And so we're going to come at this with the idea that society is stratified, that it has levels to it. And those levels mean that those are levels of inequality, okay? So I think we all probably intuitively know already that some people on the top have more money and power and opportunity than the people who are kind of closer to the bottom, right? I think we all kind of intuitively know that. And in many societies, the way that those strata are, the differences between those strata have to do with people's race, they have to do with people's social or economic class, they may have to do with their gender, and they may have to do with their sexuality or their ability as well. So society can be stratified, and I think I have a slide. Whoops, I'll come back in a sec. Oh no. Right, sorry, I got lost. Yeah, so society is stratified according to these different things. And the other thing we want to remember connected to this critical approach is the idea that our perceptions of the world are not the same, okay? So there is an absolute reality that we live in, okay? But that reality appears to all of us slightly differently, okay? So I think I talked about this yesterday, but the easiest way to imagine this is that we're all sitting in this room, we're all doing this social justice class, but the way that we perceive that class is going to be very different depending on where we are sitting, right? So I'm sitting up here and I have a certain perspective of this room, right? I can see most of you to some degree, but you sitting out there, you're seeing something totally different. So your experience of this class is different from my experience of this class, right? I might think this is fascinating and exciting, and you all may be sitting out there thinking this is totally boring, right? You might have a different perception of it. All of you are sitting in a different place in the room, and so you are seeing something slightly different from the other students that are in the room as well. Where you sit in the room depends on what you see in this room, and how you perceive this course kind of depends on where you're sitting, right? Where this kind of critical approach comes in is that it's the question of is the reality that you see, the way that you kind of understand and see and understand the world, is that the way that everyone else does, or is it slightly different for people? That's this sort of critical theory or critical approach kind of turns on that. So are we all seeing exactly the same thing? Are we all perceiving and understanding the same reality? Or is our reality a little bit different depending on who we are, okay? And so critical theory and critical approaches assume that we all see things a little bit different. There's an absolute reality, but none of us can actually see it, okay? And so the way I like to imagine this, and for those of you online, this won't really work, but in this room, if you're going to look at this room, okay, you want to see this room, you can do it, right? You can see this room, but you have to stand somewhere in order to see the room, right? You have to stand somewhere. And so depending on where you stand, it's going to allow you to see certain things, but then other things you won't see. But it's impossible to see the room without standing in it somewhere, right? You have to, whether you choose to stand at the back or the front, or maybe you want to stand up on this table so you can look down on it and see it better. Sure, all of those things work, but you have to stand in the room somewhere. And depending on where you stand, it determines what you can see and what you can't see, right? So obviously I'm sitting up here, I can see all of you lovely faces, but I can't see what's behind me, right? I can't see the board behind me. You all can see the board very, very well because of where you sit, right? And so that's kind of metaphorically what I'm talking about, but I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that in a little bit. And the last part, and I'll explain this in a minute, is sometimes knowledge is counterintuitive. Does anyone know what counterintuitive means? What's that? You might be thinking of counterproductive. Let's break it down and just go with intuitive. What does it mean when something is intuitive? Yeah, it kind of has to do with instinct, right? Some things are intuitive. Sometimes some things you just kind of know, right? They just kind of feel right. You can intuit them. You can use your intuition and kind of know these things. Things that are counterintuitive, counter is the opposite, right? So sometimes knowledge that we have is counterintuitive. And so something might feel like it's right, but we know that it's actually not. Okay, and I have a good example for this. I'll come back to it very shortly. Right, so we're going to take a critical stance in this class, and we're going to, the other thing we're going to do is operate from the perspective that knowledge is socially constructed, okay? So there are some things that are kind of factually true, okay? So if I take this little bag here and I drop it, we all know what's going to happen, right? Anyone surprised by that? No? Good. Okay. If you were, we would have to back way up. But yeah, some things are factual. We know that gravity exists. We know that when you drop something, it's going to fall. But lots of the things that lots of the aspects of how a society works are socially constructed. And so they are true because we all agree them to be true. Okay, so I'll give you some more examples of this as we go on. I know this is probably sounds a little weird to you at the moment, but it will become clear. Knowledge with humans, for the most part, is socially constructed. Many of the ideas that exist in our society and the things that we do and the things that we believe are really only true because we all believe them. Okay. Yeah, so many aspects of our reality exist only because we agree them to exist. And this is due to the fact that humans have this very strong desire to give meaning to things, right? We want to give meaning to our experiences in order to organize our experience of life, right? We want to know what things mean. We want to know why things are the way they are, because we're very kind of intelligent, emotional, complex creatures, right? And so dogs don't need to do this, right? Dogs don't need to give meaning to their experiences. They just experience things, right? It's probably one of the things that we love about dogs is they just kind of experience the world, and they're happy and sad depending on what's happening, usually happy. And we kind of love that about them because they're uncomplicated in that way, right? They don't have to wrestle with what their life means, right? They just enjoy their life and have fun. But us humans, we want to give meaning to things. And those meanings are part of the way that we socially construct knowledge, okay? And these kind of social constructions, these kind of pieces of knowledge that we create, they persist over time, and so we kind of reinforce them, right? We kind of share them with each other and pass them on. Okay, and this will become clearer in a few minutes here, I think. Right. So society is stratified. I said that. I said that. I said that. Here's a very fancy diagram having to do with class, right? And so you can divide up a society in a number of different ways, but most societies have some version of this where some people have more power and money and resources and other people have less, okay? Okay. Part of this kind of critical approach, critical theory, is the idea that our perceptions of the world are not all the same, right? And I said that, and this has to do, for this class, will have a lot to do with your identity, okay? So identity, we'll say, is, this is the dictionary definition, is kind of the fact of being or who or what a person or thing is. So identity is what someone or something is, right? So for you, I have a question for you. Who are you? And so what I'm going to do is I would like to give you 2 minutes. I'd like to give you about 2 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is write down or type out or just kind of figure out as many descriptive words about you as you can come up with, okay? So who are you? What is your identity? What are you like? Okay? So come up with as many kind of descriptive adjectives as you can to describe you, okay? 2 minutes. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, so that should do it. So I gave you 2 minutes, and I'd like to know words or maybe short phrases or things that describe your identity. Who are you? Throw some stuff at me.
Boring.
Boring? I highly doubt that is the case, but I'm not here to dispute. Boring it is. Okay, so boring is one. What else?
Excited.
Excited? Or excitable? Okay, good. What else? I'm not going to challenge any of these things. You can say whatever you want. What, enthusiastic?
Sarcastic.
Oh, sarcastic. Okay. Sarcastic, good. What else?
Childish.
Childish, okay. What else?
Can we say Iranian?
Yeah, you could say
Yeah, it's an identity.
exactly. What else?
Indonesian.
Indonesian? What's that?
Legend. Legect.
Vengeant? What does that mean? Okay, okay. Yep, sure, that's good. What else?
Quiet.
Quiet. Okay, what else? There's a lot of people who quiet will apply to them. What else?
I don't know what it's called, but person that likes food.
A person that likes, okay, person that likes food. Yeah, you're a foodie. Yeah, okay, good, good, good. What else?
Funny.
Say again?
Funny.
Funny, okay. What else?
Introverted.
Introverted, good. What else?
Ongoing.
Ongoing? How do you mean?
Like person that likes talking.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're outgoing.
Outgoing.
Outgoing. Okay, yeah, you're outgoing. You're extroverted. You like to talk to people. Good. Gabrielle says searching or exploring. Someone who's kind of looking for answers or looking for change, right? That's good. Vicky says humorous, which is another good one. And ambitious, also good. What else?
Decisive.
Decisive. Good, like you make decisions really.
Sharp.
Yeah, okay. What else?
Curious.
Curious. Good, what else? Daniel says lazy, what?
Loving.
Loving, okay. Or loving, yeah, what else?
Virgin.
What?
Virgin.
You don't have to share that, but okay. Virgin works too. That's part of your identity. What else?
Student.
Student, good. What else? What else? Vicky also says loving, and I guess she smiles a lot as well. Kenan says exciting. Haneen says able and energetic. And able to learn new skills really easily. Okay, that's good. Maybe just a couple more.
Challenging.
Challenging, okay.
Childish.
You like challenges, or you're challenging to deal with.
Active.
Okay. Sorry, George.
Childish.
Childish, okay. One more.
Responsible.
Responsible. Okay, good. Good. And Vicky's and so Vicky also says without siblings. Okay.
Stubborn.
Stubborn. Good. That's another good one. All right. So we have all of those. We have all of those things, and I didn't write them on the board this time, but often I will in class. And one of the reasons that I write them up there, and one of the reasons that I had you do that, is I wanted to demonstrate that a lot of what we are kind of socially programmed to do is to think of ourselves as individual people, right? Where when I asked you to think about who you are and describe you, most of you came up with personal characteristics, right? So boring, lazy, ambitious, challenging, funny, loving, all of those things are kind of things that are kind of unique to you, right? That's who you are as a person. And of course they're all valid, they're all correct, right? The other thing that sometimes I like to point out in this exercise is it's very interesting how many of those characteristics about ourselves really only exist in the context of other people, right? So if there's nobody else around, can you really be funny? Maybe. You can be funny to yourself. Can you be friendly if no one else is around? No, right? Can you be caring if no one else is around? Or supportive? Yeah, I guess you can always take care of yourself. But a lot of the things that we might describe, words we might describe ourselves with, really only apply in the context of other people, right? So I would almost suggest here that even our identity to some degree is socially constructed, because lots of the things that we lots of the ways we feel about ourselves exist in the context of other people, right? And without other people around, we're not quite the same person. We're not able to sort of do and be exactly who we are. But for this class, what I want to point out, and Anna, you almost ruined this for me, but no, I'm just kidding. You didn't ruin it. But group memberships are also part of our identity, a pretty important part of our identity. But often we are socialized, and we'll get to socialization later, but we're kind of conditioned, we're kind of taught not to really pay attention to them, right? And so Anna said Iranian, right? That's a part of your identity, is your nationality and your culture, right? Indonesian is another one, right? That's where you come from, and that's an important part of who you are, right? What are some other group memberships that you belong to that maybe you didn't think of before? What's that? Yeah, so your family, you belong to a certain family that has an important influence on kind of who you are and who you become. But I'm thinking like societal groups. Yeah, the religion you belong to, right? Are you a Christian? Are you a Muslim? Are you Jewish faith? Are you a Buddhist, right? That's an important group membership. What about other ones? What's that? Yes, but I'm thinking like society-wide. Yeah, your citizenship status, right? I'm a Canadian citizen and none of you are. Does that make a difference? Not right now, but in some cases it does, right? Religion is one. Gender is another one, right? Are you a man or a boy or a woman or a girl? Or are you maybe kind of something in between? Maybe you don't identify with either of those things. Your sexuality. Are you gay? Are you lesbian? Are you straight? Are you bisexual or demisexual or pansexual or asexual, right? Those are social groups that you might belong to. Your race, right? Are you Gordon? Gordon's not a race. Are you? You have a race, but you're not a race.
I have a race, but I'm not a race?
You are not a race on your own. There is no
That is
race
correct.
of Gordons
That is correct.
that I am aware of.
Or maybe I create my own race.
What's that?
I create my own race.
You're going to create your own race?
Is that theoretically possible?
Anything's possible. Things are socially constructed.
That is true. Very true.
The problem is we'd all have to agree to it for it to be a thing.
Do we all have to agree to it?
Most of us would have to.
Majority.
Yeah. Do you want to give Gordon his own race?
I guess if we could, if we have to define something, more people does not have to agree to that term. Otherwise, it's just arbitrary,
Otherwise, it's just a
made up thing.
made up thing.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Enjoy, guys.
Everything is literally made up.
Everything. Yeah, what it was, which Avengers movie is it where Star-Lord says something to Thor, and he says it's a made-up word, and Thor says all words are made up. What's that?
Infinity War?
Say what?
Infinity War.
Is it Infinity War? Yeah. But Thor's right. All words are made up. Where the heck were we? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, your race is an important part of who you are, right? Because, again, in most societies around the world, different racial groups are treated differently, right? So your race, even though you might feel like it's not an important thing, or you don't really want it to be an important thing, or you might not see yourself a certain way, society will interact with you slightly differently based on your race. So that's an important part of your identity as well. So all of these group memberships are kind of critically important to our identity, but often we don't think about them because we're encouraged to think of ourselves as unique individuals, which we definitely are. But for this class, we also want to look at group identities, right? So who people are in terms of race, gender, class, religion, citizenship status, religious affiliation. Those are the things that are going to be a little more important in this class. Not that your individual characteristics aren't important, because they definitely are. Yeah, and so what this is kind of meant to do, what this kind of exercise is meant to do, is introduce this concept of positionality, which is another made-up word, more recently made up than many. Positionality is important for this course, and it's important because it has to do with that idea of the room. You know, I said where you stand in the room determines what you can see in the room. Positionality is just that. So it's the idea that your identity in society affects how you experience that society, okay? So if I'm walking down the street in Vancouver, Avera, where are you from? Singapore. So if I'm walking down the street in Vancouver and Avera's walking down the street in Vancouver, we are going to have a slightly different experience of what Vancouver society is like, right? I'm white, I'm male, I'm old-ish, and Avera's young, right? Avera's a woman. Avera is from Singapore. And so society is going to react to her and interact with her slightly different than they are with me. If I walk down the street in Singapore, I might have a slightly different experience of Singapore than Avera will. And in part, that has to do with our upbringing. Did you grow up in Singapore? Yeah. So part of that has to do with where you're kind of comfortable and where you've been brought up, but it also has to do with our group identity, right? And so Avera and I, whether we're in Vancouver or whether we're in Singapore, we're going to have a slightly different experience of what that society is like. Society is going to treat us differently because we're different, right? We belong to different social groups. And so that's what positionality is kind of all about. Where you stand in society determines what you can see, okay? I wonder what I was going to say here. I have no idea. I have no idea what's on the next slide. Let's see. What determines where you stand? Oh, yeah. Okay. So most of us walk through the world with the belief that the person next to us experiences the same reality as we do. But imagine tomorrow you wake up as either Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or you wake up as Rihanna. Are people going to treat you differently?
Way different.
Way differently, right? I walk down the street, nobody cares who I am. Nobody, I'm just some nobody random guy walking down the street. But if I wake up as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I'm going to be treated much differently, right? Because of the fact that I'm gigantic and jacked, right? Dwayne is much more handsome than I am, so people are going to treat him differently than they do me. He's a celebrity, right? And a wealthy celebrity. So he's going to get treated totally different than me, in part because of who he is as a person, right? He's a personality that we know, but also because of the social groups he belongs to, right? And so when he walks down the street, he's going to have a totally different experience of Vancouver than I will. And the same thing with Rihanna, right? Ladies, if you walk down the street, if you suddenly became Rihanna, you would have a very different experience, right? So again, society will treat you differently depending on who you are, right? And so again, if Avera and I are walking down the same street, yeah, we're walking down the same street, but we're having a slightly different experience. Society is kind of looking at us and interacting with us differently because we're different people, right? Especially with regard to our social groups. Ooh, that's tiny. So my point here is that society treats us differently based on the social categories that we belong to. And all of these, I knew there wasn't one more. All of these are important, right? And so we are often taught and conditioned to not pay attention to any of these things, right? We're taught to treat each other as unique individual people, which we should. That's good. You should treat each other as individual people. But we should also remember that all of these things affect not only how people perceive society, so how they view it, but also how society views them. Okay? So all of these group memberships that make up an important part of our identity, right? Our gender, our age, our appearance, are we super good looking or not? The race we belong to, our ethnicity, our religion, our mental or physical ability or disability, our social or economic class, and our nationality or our citizenship or our language ability. All of those things affect the way we see society and the way society sees us. And so because of that, we're all going to experience society just a little bit differently. Okay, and that's what positionality is. Who you are, not as an individual person, but who you are according to these social groups determines to some degree what society is like for you. Does that make some sort of sense? A little bit of sense? Okay. All right. So I think it's time for a break because we've been working really hard. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back and then we'll talk about other stuff. Okay. So. Before we broke, we were talking about this idea of positionality, right? The idea that the social groups you belong to in society determine what you see. Again, your individual characteristics do as well, but that's not a focus of this class. We're talking about group membership, right? So group membership influences what you see because, of course, you bring with you certain types of perspectives that you've learned, and of course, society will look at you and treat you in a certain way based on who you are, right? We all know that society treats men and women a little bit different, right? So if you're walking around in a man's body, you're going to be treated in one way and you'll have a certain experience. If you're walking around in a woman's body, you're going to have a slightly different experience, right? And again, I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong. I'm just kind of saying this is the way things are. Right, so we saw all of this stuff already. Right, so contrary to what we're often taught, and contrary to what some people would currently like you to believe, I'm going to argue that categories such as gender and race and sexuality and religion, they actually do matter, and they matter quite a bit. And I'm not saying that they should matter, and I'm not saying that I want them to matter. I'm just simply saying that they do, right? Our experience of society varies according to the social groups we belong to, right? So, ready, guys? Back row, you ready to go? Okay. So, these parts of our identity contribute to our experience, and therefore, we don't really have, and this is a social justice thing, we don't really have the life that we have through merit alone, okay? So the reason that we kind of are where we are in society has to do a lot with things that are random, that are by chance, right? So I'm a Canadian citizen, for instance, right? And that is beneficial to me in a number of ways, both within Canada and when I travel, right? When I travel, people tend to like Canadians, right? We have a pretty good, I think we have a pretty good reputation, do we not? Right? Not like Americans, right? No, I'm just kidding. I think people kind of like Canadians, and so, you know, the fact that I'm in Canada has certain benefits for me, and when I leave Canada, it also has certain benefits. Most people kind of like us. Did I earn that Canadianness? Did I become Canadian through hard work? No, it's a fluke. It's an accident, right? I just happened to be born in Canada. I just happened to be Canadian, right? And there are benefits to being that way. I'm also a man, right? And so as a man in Canadian society and in many societies around the world, that has certain benefits, right? Did I earn my manness? Did I work hard and become a man?
I think you do.
To a degree, but you know, why am I a man? Fluke. Yeah, I was born that way, right? The genes combined in a certain way, and poof, here I am as a man. That's not any of my doing. I'm just lucky that way, right? Am I a smart person? Careful, there is a right answer to this. Let's just assume that I am, right? Let's just assume I'm a smart person. Did I become smart through hard work?
I think so.
Yeah, to a degree, but that's a genetic thing as well, right? I am, you know, fortunately, I have the genetics to be a reasonably smart person, right? Fortunately, I had parents that read to me when I was a kid. Fortunately, I live in a country where schooling is paid for and compulsory, and the education is pretty good. So that's kind of outside of my control as well, right? So here I am, a Canadian, a male, and a reasonably smart person. All of those things have benefited me in my life, but do any of them have to do with merit? Do any of them have to do with hard work? No, right? They're a fluke. Fortunately, I'm Canadian. Fortunately, I'm a man. Not that there's anything wrong with being a woman, but I'm perfectly happy with who I am. And I'm a reasonably intelligent person, but none of those things are within my control, right? They're just things that I happen to be by luck. And so we'll come back to that idea too, that the idea that our experience in society and the sort of position we wind up with or wind up in is not entirely due to our own hard work or our own individual characteristics. In many cases, it's due to luck, right? And for me, Canadian, male, reasonably intelligent person, it's all luck, right? It has nothing to do with me. Earlier, I said that sometimes knowledge is counterintuitive, right? And so we said intuition and intuitive was kind of things that you kind of just know, right? You kind of figure out, you know them to be right or you know them to be the case. But things that are counterintuitive are things that are in opposition to your intuition, right? They're the opposite of your intuition. So, yeah, contrary to intuition, contrary to common sense, but true nonetheless. So, sometimes what appears to be true is actually not. So the way that our perceptions of the world, our senses, the way that we think things are, deceive us. Let me give you an example. This will make more sense. Most of you know there is something wrong with this picture, right? What is wrong with this picture?
The earth is flat.
In this picture, the earth is flat, right? Is the earth flat? Yes? Some people think so. You're just messing with me. Is the earth flat? How do you know? Science, right? Through science. And it's true, right? We have lots of scientific means, but if you think of your everyday experience, if you just put science aside for a second, we really experience the earth as flat, don't we? Like if you look out the window, it doesn't look round, it looks flat, right? If I go outside and I put this down on the ground, is it going to roll away to the other side of the planet? No, it's just going to sit right there, right? Our experience of the world is reasonably flat, right? So our intuition might tell us that the earth was flat, and of course for many, many years in the past, people thought the earth was flat. But it's not, right? Because it's counterintuitive. Interestingly, there are groups of people around the world who still believe the earth is flat. They believe this is the way the earth is. This round earth is all a conspiracy, and there's all kinds of powerful people involved convincing you that the world is round. We won't deal with them. But this is kind of what I want to point out here, is that the idea that the earth is round is very well established, but it is challenging to our common sense. We don't experience the world as round. When we look out the window, looks pretty flat to me. Again, if you drop something outside, it doesn't roll away to the other side of the world. It just sits there, right? So our experience of the world is flat, right? You can't look west and see Japan, right? So our experience of the world is flat, but we know through science that it's actually round. So the reality is in opposition to our experience, okay? Now, that might sound a little bit ridiculous, and again, talking about flat earths might seem a little bit ridiculous too. But again, the world seems flat when we rely on our conscious perceptions, but science can expose the error of that perception, right? Science can show us that even though we don't think the earth is flat, the earth appears flat to us, in fact, it is round. Why are we talking about this? Well, we're talking about this because our experience of society is very much like this, okay? Our experience of society is very much one that is based in our own perceptions of reality. But just because we experience society to be a certain way doesn't mean that it actually is, okay? So sometimes we need science and data to expose the way society actually works, because from where we stand in society, we might not be able to see the full picture. So it's just the same as the flat earth or the round earth. Because of where we stand on the earth, just standing on the ground, it seems flat. But if you go to the moon, of course, you will clearly see that it is round, right? So when we discuss ideas of social inequality, many people default to their own individual perceptions, right? And so it's almost like asking people, hey, do you think the earth is round or flat? And they look around and they're like, yep, flat, looks flat to me, right? It's the same thing with social justice issues. When you talk about things like racism or sexism or religious oppression, people tend to kind of look around them and they're like, yep, I don't see any racism around here. Must not be any, right? But that's not the case. That's not true. And so we need science, we need data to help expose these sort of broader patterns that aren't obvious to us. And so people express this kind of feeling in a number of ways. So just like, looking around and saying, yep, Earth looks flat to me, people will say all kinds of, people will say all kinds of different things. And all of these are just like the flat Earth idea. There's a grain of truth to them, but they don't really represent what reality is. So again, yes, the Earth feels flat, but it's not. People should be judged by what they do, not by the color of their skin. Yeah, that's true, right? We should do that. But unfortunately, that's not really the way society and the world operates. People are judged by the color of their skin. We kind of know that to be true. Many people will say, I accept people for who they are. Great, you should. But as we'll get to tomorrow or Monday, we'll see that the way that you interact with people has a lot to do with who those people are and has a lot to do with your own social programming. Okay, but we'll get to that. I see people as individuals. Awesome, you should. However, we also see people according to their group membership, right? So we treat people differently depending on their gender, right? Guys, do you interact with guys a little bit different than you interact with girls? A little bit, right? Girls, do you interact with other girls differently than you interact with guys? Yeah. What about really old people? Do you interact with old people differently than really, really young people? Of course you do, right? You play with kids because they're cute and they're little. And, sometimes old people are cute and little too, but you don't play with them. You treat them differently, right? So again, we see people as individuals, but we also treat them differently depending on the social group they belong to, right? And sometimes that's good, right? You shouldn't treat a child like an adult, but sometimes it's not so good, but we'll get into it. It's focusing on difference that divides us. To some degree, that's also true, right? If you're obsessed with just finding out how people are not like you, then it's going to build distance between you. But we do have to appreciate those differences because, again, we are all unique people, and there is a difference in terms of, do I want to say that yet? No, I'm going to save it for later. This one here, my parents taught me that all people are equal. Awesome, your parents did a good job. But that doesn't mean that all people are treated equally, and not even by ourselves, right? Sometimes we can treat people unequally without even really noticing it. And I'll show you how that works maybe in another week or so. People say a bunch of other things too. I always treat everyone the same. No, you don't. Nobody treats everybody the same, right? We treat people differently depending on all of those social categories that we talked about. We treat people differently depending on how good looking they are, right? The better looking they are, the more we tend to get a little bit nervous and awkward and say silly things, right? This is a nice idea, but it's not true. Nobody treats everyone the same. I've been discriminated against, so I don't have any privilege. We haven't talked about what privilege is yet, but we'll get to it. But this is saying I've been discriminated against, so I can't discriminate against anyone else. That is not true either, right? So discrimination can very easily happen, even if you've been kind of the victim of discrimination in the past. Our generation is more open-minded. I assume this would be said by a younger person. To some degree, that's also true, but it doesn't mean that prejudice and discrimination doesn't exist, right? I have friends with all races and we are all fine with each other. That is also awesome. But it doesn't mean that there is no racism or discrimination that is occurring, right? So again, just because you feel the world is flat doesn't mean that it is. Just because you have a group of people of all races and everyone's getting along doesn't mean that there is no discrimination or inequality occurring, right? I don't think race and gender make any difference as long as you work hard. It's nice that you don't think that, but unfortunately it is true, right? Race and gender do have effects on your life, right? And of course, if you're paying attention to the news, that's exactly what's happening with Black Lives Matter movement in the US. Black Americans are saying, and have been saying for a long time, and they're not the only ones, they've been saying that even if you work hard, your race and your gender, but we'll get to that, your race will work against you, right? You will have to work harder than people of other races. And so it's nice that this person thinks that it doesn't make a difference, but unfortunately they're wrong. It does. And again, I'm not saying that it should, I'm just saying that it does. It's white males who are in the minority now. This is not true at all, even statistically speaking. And it imagines that social power is about numbers, okay? That it's about majorities and minorities. And we'll get to this later, but we'll see that that's not true either. Power doesn't have to do with numbers. Power has to do with control of social institutions, okay? And so you don't need numbers, you don't need a majority to do it. For instance, in Canada, if we look at just men and women, who has power in Canadian society, men or women? Women do?
I think so. I've heard that. I don't know.
They do. They have some, but I mean, who has more? Men do. Men have more power in Canada than women. Certainly, we are a more equal country than other countries. In some ways, we're also a less equal country than other countries. I would say men have more power in Canada than women do. But if you look at our population, you'll see that women are actually the majority. There's about 52% women, 48% men. So ladies, you are in the majority, but still most of the power is held by men, right? If you look at people who work in government, if you look at the richest people in Canada, most of them are still men. This is wrong too for a number of reasons. Women are just as sexist as men. Well, we'll unpack that a little bit later. That has to do with the definition of oppression and what the difference is between sexism or racism and discrimination. But we'll get to that. That one's not true either. So most of these are all things that people often will say. And again, they might have, where's my time? Okay. They might have kind of a deeply held feeling about these ideas. They might really feel that they're true, and they might really believe in them, and that's okay. But again, just because you really believe something is true doesn't mean that it is, right? And so just because you really believe that the earth is flat, which some people do, doesn't make it flat, right? It's still round. And so opinions that people might hold, like all of those things that we just saw, people might really believe them. They might feel true, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily are. Lots of the statements that we just read are kind of oversimplifications, and so they're partly true, but partly not. Some of them are based on different ideologies. Sometimes they're based on different stereotypes or ideas that exist in popular culture, or people's personal experiences, or the fact that they just don't really know what they're talking about. All of those are opinions that people hold, but it doesn't mean that they're correct, right? And so we'll talk about this a little bit later too, the idea that opinions are one thing, but informed knowledge is different, right? Lots of people have opinions about things, but it doesn't mean that their opinion is informed or valid or useful, right? The other thing that we'll see, and we'll come across this a little bit later in the course too, is the idea that mainstream narratives, and so narratives is kind of a story, and so the ideas that are circulated by the media, so either in the news or on social media or in movies or television or music, often those media sources will circulate the idea that society is fair. And so if you want to overcome injustice, if you want to create an equal society, just stop being such a jerk, right? Just stop being so racist or stop being so sexist. And while again, yeah, don't be a jerk, but there's more to it than that, right? You can't fix racism simply by not being such a jerk, right? There's more to it. And that was what was coming out after the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others in the US, where many people, but Black Lives Matter, were standing up and saying, no, you have a problem with systemic racism. It's not about individual people. It's not about some people being jerks or ignorant. You have a problem with the way that society works. You have a problem with the system, okay? And so we'll get to that later as well. Yeah, because again, the research demonstrates, the informed science demonstrates that the statements that we just read are not true, okay? So they're a little misleading, they're overly simplistic, or they're just wrong, okay? So again, just like the round earth, how do we discover the truth? Well, we talk about it and we learn about it. So in this course, we're going to examine social inequality by talking about things like this, right? Talking about our understanding of oppression and privilege and sex and sexuality and gender and race and religion. And all of these are kind of emotionally reactive topics, okay? And kind of the reason that they are, sorry, I'm just gonna jump ahead. The reason that they are is because many of our ideas about how society works and how the world works and things about sexuality, right? What a man should be, what a woman should be, what's right and wrong, you know, what race has to do with anything, religious ideas. All of these are part of our culture. And we'll get to this probably tomorrow or Monday. All of us have been raised in different cultures, right? We've all been enculturated. We'll get to that too. We've all been raised in different cultures and we've all been taught different things. And so every culture has, every culture is a set of ideas and practices, okay? And so lots of times when we think about a certain culture, we think about this stuff at the top of the iceberg, right? So if you think about a foreign culture, a culture that's outside of your own, often we think of this stuff, right? Food and music and the way people dress, and maybe their literature or their media, maybe their celebrations. Maybe we think of Chinese New Year if we're not Chinese, or things like that, right? Those are the things we easily think about when we think of a different culture. But these things are kind of on the surface of culture. They're very visible, but often they aren't strongly tied to emotion, right? So, you know, if you're from China and you come to Canada or the US and you eat Chinese food, and you realize that, oh gosh, these Americans or Canadians have no idea how to make Chinese food, what is this? Usually you don't have a very strong emotional reaction to that, right? But the deeper that you go into culture, the more these ideas become more abstract, but they also become, people have a higher emotional attachment to them. And so if you start to violate any of these sort of deeply held ideas, people have a much stronger emotional reaction to it. And so if you look here, you'll see the definition of obscenity. What kind of things are obscene, right? When you challenge people's cultural beliefs on obscenity, people tend to have a reaction, right? You can't just walk down the street here with no clothes on. People will get freaked out, right? In other places in the world, if you walk down the street with no clothes on, people will get even more freaked out. In some places in the world, people will be less freaked out. But again, there's a definition of obscenity here, which is kind of deeply held in culture. And so if you break the rules, if you get it wrong, then people will have an emotional reaction. And so lots of the things that we talk about in social justice are more deeply held here. And so people can have strong reactions to ideas about gender. So what a man is supposed to be and what a woman is supposed to be, or whether there's other genders than just man and woman. Sexuality, right? Some cultures are very okay with homosexuality, with people being gay and lesbian and so on. Other cultures are not okay with it, right? And so discussing it or experiencing it or seeing it, some people will have a very strong emotional reaction to it, right? So all of us have been brought up in a culture that has particular ideas about all of those things and many, many more. And when those ideas are challenged, people will have a little reaction to them. And again, the deeper that you go, the more strongly people will have an emotional reaction to it, right? Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do is I'm just going to pause for a second there. And I'm just going to ask if anyone has $20 for me. No. I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions about what we've talked about so far, because a lot of that was complicated. A lot of that will make more sense as we go forward. I'm just trying to sort of introduce you to some of the things that we'll be thinking about. So, questions. We talked about positionality and socially constructed knowledge, and sometimes the fact that knowledge is counterintuitive. And now we're talking a little bit about culture and sort of emotional responses to rules being violated. How does that sound? Does that sound okay? Yeah, okay-ish. Online people, are you okay? I'm just going to give them a minute to respond. So tomorrow, let me just check my text messages here. Okay. Okay. everyone looks to be okay, I think. So that's all I have for you today. I'll let you go. Have a nice afternoon, and I'll see you at 10:05 tomorrow. What? Have a nice rest of the morning for another 23 minutes. Then have a nice afternoon. Then have a nice evening. And I'll see you all tomorrow, okay? All right.